It is raining right now in Los Angeles, but things are still remarkably dry here in California. The consequences of the Golden State's drought, the worst in over 1,000 years, are apparent in everything from forest fires to the length of the showers you're allowed to take. Earlier this week, the state approved a sweeping plan to cut water use in cities and towns by 25% over the next 9 months. Cities are now forced to limit watering on public property and encourage homeowners to let the grass on their lawns die. But beyond brown grass and short showers, the drought is having a devastating effect on the most basic system of all, the food chain. In Northern California, salmon eggs have all but disappeared thanks to falling water levels. The kangaroo rat, a cornerstone of the Southern California ecosystem, has nearly died off, and drier conditions have forced land animals to seek food in urban gardens. Ahead of the busy summer season, the State Wildlife Agency in Lake Tahoe is preparing itself for a barrage of bear sightings. Joining me now is conservation biologist Reese Halter and Associate Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation at UC Berkeley, Justin Brashears. Justin, let me start with you. In terms of the kangaroo rat, right? You hear that and people immediately think, oh, well, who cares about what's happening to the kangaroo rat? The numbers of the kangaroo rat have been depleted. I think 95% of them have died out since 2010. Why does that matter?
Yeah, so that's a good point, and you're exactly right. A lot of folks say it's a rat, should we really care? But the giant kangaroo rat is this amazing ecosystem engineer. It's this active digger. It's bringing up these rich soils from deep in the earth, pulling them up to the surface, and by doing that, it's changing its whole ecosystem. So it's providing a rich substrate for a whole diversity of plants and insects in California, and it's also benefiting the whole ranching community by increasing the diversity of plants.
Reese, in terms of pieces of the food chain, right? We're at the top of it, right? So we rarely concern ourselves with what happens to smelt or the kangaroo rat. But the ripple effects are pretty profound, aren't they? Once you take one piece out.
Yeah, in this case, this critter is a keystone, and you're talking the entire ecosystem is collapsing. We're also seeing that hundreds of thousands of acres of grassland are becoming desert. And this is telling us what's ahead. Now it's up to us to plan. We've got 1 in 8 Americans that live in our state. We're the 8th largest economy, 45 billion agri. Half of what's on everybody's dinner plate grown in America comes from us. Now what?
Justin, Kevin McCarthy, who represents part of California, is suggesting that because of the drought, we should relax some of the constraints that are placed upon society and in companies, to relax parts of the Endangered Species Act, which would allow us to sort of more fully exploit reservoirs of water. Tell me if that is a good or a bad idea in your mind.
Yeah, I think that's a Band-Aid and a bad Band-Aid at that. It might satisfy some constituents for a very short period, but it's not going to resolve California's water problem. And what we're going to get is we're going to have many of these endangered species we're going to end up having to pull into captivity, and it's going to cost the taxpayer tens of millions of dollars over the long run. So it's not, when we relax those regulations, we tend not to unrelax them, as it were. So I don't think it's going to address the needs of California or the big issues for the ecological situation in our state.
Reese, but so if relaxing some of those provisions is off the table, in terms of the water cuts, people say, all right, consumers will take shorter showers. They'll let their lawns die. But agribusiness in California is really, really big business. Yeah. And they have not been subject to the same mandates that California citizens have. And I guess I wonder, how effective do you think this water rationing can be if a huge part of the water usage is not under them?
Well, step one is we've got to bring it to everybody's attention. We've done that. We'll be having a different conversation in 12 months from now, because you're dead right. It is the agribusiness, but we're talking not only of food. Now we're talking about national food security.
Right.
So these are unintended consequences of burning in excess of 96 million metric tons of heat-trapping gases daily. And this is a very big issue. I'll tell you why, because it isn't just the droughts that are happening now. It's the fact that the temperatures are higher. Yeah. Higher temperatures and droughts, trees die, animals die, ecosystems die. Guess what? When they die, where are we left?
Justin, to that end, you know, Governor Brown has taken swift action as far as the drought. He's been talking about it a lot. He's been speaking about climate change in no uncertain terms. Is the silver lining in all of this that he has been able to push forward a more aggressive climate change agenda in this moment? I believe that Brown has ordered the state to cut the pollutants to 40% below 1990 levels by the year 2030, which are the most aggressive targets in North America. I mean, that would seem to be sort of, if there is a good thing that comes out of here, it's given him space to do that. Would you concur?
Yeah, you know, I think that's right. I think, you know, the climate change projections have told us California was headed in this direction, and so it was a question of maybe sooner or later, and we do have a governor who's, you know, for good and bad, taking it head on, and it's very much on our consciousness now as a state. So yeah, we do need to face it. You know, I think, you know, as Reese mentioned, we're going to have to face the ag water usage. You know, 80% of water use in the state, and we're going to have carrots and sticks, I'm sure, to try and regulate and come up with more efficient water use. But you know, there is a silver lining if we're able to take it on as a state and accept that we live in a very dry region.
Let me ask you, Reese, before we go, California usually leads the country in terms of regulation. If California decides to do something relating to the auto industry, whether it's, you know, smog levels or you know, miles per gallon in terms of fuel usage, the rest of the country follows. Do you think this is an area, granted the rest of the country hopefully will never see a drought like California, but in the way that California is tackling the issue of climate, do you think that it becomes a model for the rest of the country?
Absolutely. AB 34, what you're talking about, which comes into effect 2020, for the first pulse down at 25% of 1990 levels, yes. And for 2030, yes. What we're looking at, though, is there's 1,552 wastewater injection sites active in our state, and they busted in October 3 billion gallons of water tainted with thallium, arsenic, and nitrates that were pumped into the Central Valley aquifer. Fracking gone. And you know what? It's subsidized. This repugnant business of subsidizing these heat-trapping XYZs has got to end.
Well, it is certainly, all of this has been brought to the fore by this devastating drought. And if there is one good thing to come of it, there is a national dialogue on the issues like never before. Reese Halter and Justin Brashears, thank you so much, guys, for your time.